Before we begin, we'd like to thank the National Science Foundation Office of Polar Programs for their financial support to ARCIS and this seminar series. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Cana Uluak Itchuaqiyaq, is an Iñupiaq scholar activist dedicated to equitable Arctic research and amplifying the voices of underrepresented communities. Cana is an assistant professor of professional and technical writing at Virginia Tech. Her interdisciplinary research combines expertise in the humanities and environmental sciences to develop culturally appropriate and capacity-driven science communication. Cana serves on various boards and committees. She is the non-federal lead of the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, that's IARPIC, their Participatory Research and Indigenous Leadership in Research team, that's PILR. And she serves on the board of directors for the Arctic Research Consortium of the United States, ARCIS. Corina Qaaġraq Kramer is an Iñupiaq community leader and advocate for Indigenous culture and youth. Corina is the director of operations at Akalak Trust in Kotzebue, Alaska, where she develops regional, state, and national partnerships for language and culture work. With over 15 years of experience in village outreach, organization, and collaboration, and 25 years of youth leadership and mentorship, Corina is a determined, self-educated, well-connected, and strong leader who brings people together to make positive change. Corina serves as a CIAMET faculty member and Delta Keats Fellowship Community Director at the Harvard Center for Global Health Delivery. Thank you and welcome, Cana and Corina.
Betsy, thank you. Okay, like Betsy and Cana said, I'm Qaaġraq, Uluak Qaaġraq. My family is from Narvik, Alaska, and I live in Kotzebue. I'm the director of operations at Akalak Trust, and I'm very glad to be here and welcome you to our talk on getting started with equitable Arctic research at any stage of your project. Tips from Inuit Arctic researchers.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cana Uluak Itchuaqiyaq. I'm an assistant professor of technical and professional writing at Virginia Tech, and I'm pretty excited to be here today. I served on the ARCIS board, like was said in the introduction, and I find it to be quite an honor to be invited to speak, I guess, in your own hometown. So that makes me feel really good. Thank you so much for this invitation for today. So as Corina said, we are, well, number one, she didn't say we are sisters. Corina and I, Corina's my older sister. She helped raise me. And part of my success is her success because she was one of my biggest supports as a child and even as an adult growing up. We are from Kotzebue, Alaska. So you can see this image, which is from ICC, the map of Inuit and Nunat, the Inuit homelands. And you can see an arrow pointing to Kotzebue, Alaska, which is part of the Nana region of Alaska. And we just want to be clear today that our perspectives, we are Iñupiaq, and our perspectives come from that Iñupiaq perspective and our value system. And there are many other Arctic Indigenous points of view. So we really want to make sure that when you move forward in your work in Indigenous communities in the Arctic, that you make sure to pay them the respect to understand their points of view and their value systems and not try to put ours on top of theirs.
And we also, like I said before, are from Narvik, Alaska. Our family is from Narvik. And in the, it's about 60 miles northeast of Kotzebue. And you'll see in the black and white photo is a picture of our mom's side of the family. The lady in the middle is our Cana Uluak, who is Cana's namesake, and she's holding our aunt, and our mother is the cute little girl in the circle on the bottom right. So that's our mom, Gladys.
And on the right-hand side photo, the sepia photo, that was taken in Kotzebue around 1925. The other one was around 1950. And you can see my namesake, Itchuaqiyaq, our great-grandfather, standing next to Iñupiaq, our great-grandmother. And you can see the little boy circled is Qaaġraq, who is our grandfather as a little boy, and that's Corina's namesake.
And our parents, Caleb and Gladys Pungawi, Our mom, Gladys Iñupiaq, is on the left, cutting fish right in front of our house. And she has been really our elder guide, especially since our dad passed away. And she, in her own career, she retired as the chief operating officer of our Native corporation. So she also was a great leader.
And then this is our father, Caleb Luman Pungawi. He's Siberian Iñupiaq from St. Lawrence Island. He's from Savunga, the Quagmi clan. And, you know, one thing that he fought for in his career was basically Indigenous seats at the table, right? That there was no decisions about us or research about us without us. And, you know, he really fought for that as part of his work with ICC, with Qaaġraq, Atacalic Trust as well, where Corina works, and in various other roles that he had in his career. So we are really proud to be uptaking some of his work here today.
And on our Inuit land here in Northwest Alaska, our ancestors identified the Iñupiaq value system as our core values for our people. And these values allow us to live in harmony with each other and on this harsh land for thousands of years. Iñupiaq values are still very important to our people because they help us not only survive, but thrive. And it's interesting, I'm hosting a Arctic Indigenous Peoples Summit here. And as I was touring around with them last night, I was talking about the values, and they were just so, it was just so cool to see that they have a very similar value system in their areas as well.
That's cool. So one of the reasons that we were invited here today is because back in March, I got a hankering and I wrote this guide for innovation, the Equitable Arctic Research Guide. And, you know, I self-published it and I put it out there, and I got a lot of feedback from people, and then also support from Corina as I was writing this guide. And in it, there are 10 tactics for equitable Arctic research. And those 10 tactics are, well, they're not simple. Let's just be real. And they, you know, in that guide, you can see a little blurb on there, but it requires a lot of work. So the first tactic is practice cultural humility. The second is foster Indigenous-led research. The third, share decision-making power. Number 4, build long-term community capacities. Number 5, build long-term relationships. Number 6, co-create research agreements. Number 7, respect Indigenous knowledges. Number 8, prioritize data sovereignty. Number 9, share research benefits. And number 10, practice anti-oppressive research. And so these are all things that Corina and I, in our research roles, her as a community partner in research and actually the lead of our research projects, and me as the academic lead for some of our research practice partnerships here at Virginia Tech, we're putting these into practice, and we know how hard it is. But we wanted to share with you, or Corina's going to share with you, 3 simple things that you can do to get yourself started on these 10 more intense tasks.
Yes, so the 3 things that we want to pull out of this today for you is some very important things: that you invest in good communication from the community perspective, invest in learning about the community, the past, present, future goals. I'm always saying to the doctors I work with at Harvard, you know, how long has it taken you to study and, you know, go to school and learn about what your practice is right now? Well, take some time and study who we are, read some books about us, because get to know us in not only, you know, a present way, but the past and our historical things that we've done, because we have to, because that'll help you to serve us better. And so that's what I mean by that. And also invest in relationships with the community, professional and personal.
Now get to know us, and in through that ability, these investments that you have, it gets you from, you know, practicing culture of humility, number 1, and it helps get you to number 10, which is practicing anti-oppressive research. And that is, you know, there are a lot of work that you need to do as researchers, and, you know, community expectations for how equity is in Arctic research are increasing, right? And so in order to meet those needs and demands of our communities, there's work on Arctic researchers' sides.
So in 2021, I was working for the health organization here, and Cana had come to visit for several weeks, and we participated in an Inuit facilitation workshop hosted by ICC Canada. We spent 5 weeks learning alongside fellow Inuit from Canada and the US, and we began thinking about the issues facing our communities. The participants in this workshop come from a wide area of Inuit Nanat. There were multiple participants from Northwest Alaska, myself, and there was a young lady from Nome as well. Others were from Iñupiaq, Nunavut, and Nunatsiavut, Canada. In our workshop today, we'll give you lots of time to think about and challenge you to really put into practice and put onto paper even some how you'll incorporate equity in your Arctic research. And to help you, we'll share the perspectives of our colleagues from the ICC workshop that they shared with us. And we hope you'll listen to our experiences and needs when it comes to our communities and others, because we believe that this knowledge will not only help with protecting our people, but also help other marginalized communities as well. In other words, while the perspectives we will be sharing is geared towards working in our Inuit communities, what we'll discuss about respectful community engagement is likely transferable to working with other Arctic Indigenous communities. And it's interesting that, my theories of doing Arctic research and then talking to, like I did last night with the people from Inuit Nanat, and we just share really similar stories as well in Arctic research. So it was really cool to see that, in this, and just kind of that, find that common ground that we have as Inuit community partners.
Let me start this is just a loop. There's not really meant to be any sound. In this video, you can see me. I'm learning how to attach or putting a new net on our float line. Or that's the lead line maybe. And we're just working on a subsistence net. And I want you to think about you and your own research in particular with Indigenous communities or in Indigenous lands, right? So what are some things that you need, right? What do you want to come out of your research? What do you require to make your work successful, especially in an era of changing demands from communities and funders? What are the things that you need? And so Corina mentioned that you might want to get a piece of paper out. Later on, as we move forward, we're going to actually ask you to think. We're going to pause, and we're going to have you either write in the chat, or you can write on your own piece of paper or whatever it is on a Word document, because we want you to put this work into action today.
And that handsome guy right there is my husband, Lance Kramer, and he's just whistling away. I think he can do that work blindfolded by now. He's been a commercial fisherman since childhood. And but Cana framed, what do you need as a researcher? What do you want? What do you require? And then let's look at the flip side of that and see from the community standpoint, what do the people need? What do the people want? What do the people require? And even more importantly, how do you know? How are you going to find that out? I tell you what, we have some behind closed doors talk sometimes that only the community is privy to, and we get to know each other. We have our local politics and all the different things that have a community stamp on them as a unique stamp for that community. And so how do you know? How are you going to find those things out? So Lance, as you can see, he just taking it easy. Well, Cana was studying really hard and being so intent on getting her knot straight. But but she sat and learned with him very patiently.
So in that 2021 ICC workshop that Corina mentioned, we asked our Inuit community partners and leaders, they're all from across Inuit Nunat, to help us with understanding what researchers need to do before, during, and after visiting our Inuit communities for research activities. So right here we have the slide for the before answers. So in this workshop, we asked our colleagues a few questions. The first one was, what are some things researchers can do to prepare themselves before coming into your home community? What are some things that researchers can do to avoid causing harm, like disrespect, right? So here were their anonymized responses. The first one is try and make a relationship with us before coming into our communities. Present to our tribe for permission to do research activities. Learn our style of communication and adjust presentations, communication to that style of communication. Learn what some of our research needs and priorities are. Educate themselves on some of the realities of our communities. Learn the history of our community. They need to learn a little bit more about our community. That kept coming up and up and up again. Hence our three takeaways at the beginning of this presentation. And then don't expect us to be like them, but also recognize that we are also like them in a way. So, stop essentializing basically, and find a co-researcher from our community and pay them or find a way to compensate them appropriately, and figure out ways to buy supplies in our community.
Yes, and one was highlighted, don't expect us to be like them, but also recognize that we're also like them in a way. You can put anyone together and you'll find a common ground, you'll find a commonality and something relatable. And so that's one thing as Arctic Indigenous peoples, is that we're relational in the way that we communicate and live together and work together. And so we need to see who you are, and taking off the professional layer and seeing underneath is so important for us because it builds trust. And so I guess finding the commonality and the relational ways that any two people can find is really important. So in this workshop, we don't want to just talk at you. We want you to do some action towards equity. And so like I said before, this is giving you a challenge and an opportunity to actually write down. So if you can get your pen and paper out or type it in the chat or in your notes on your phone. So like the title of this talk is Getting Started with Tips for Inuit Researchers. Incorporating equity can happen at any stage of research, but it's best if it happens starting from the conceptualization stage. So before it's even something that is solidly in your mindset of what your research project and the questions are. So we're going to give you about 2 minutes to think about your own work and write down what you need. This is what do you need before engaging with Arctic communities. We invite you to share what you come up with in the chat, so we can all learn together and hold one another accountable. And we'll put the community's responses back up to help you with this. So let's take a couple of minutes. Thank you for all the responses. These are really good. I love an active group. Wow, it's a lot of really good comments.
Yeah, this is really great. We had a chance to take our research team up to the Arctic from Virginia Tech. It was just a relationship building time, and it was really great. Okay, the alarm's about to go off.
And when they debriefed and they came back, they were just like, Corina, you told us all these things for a year and a half. We had weekly meetings to talk about the different project aspects that we had. But when they hit the ground and they met the people and they met our kids and they, it was just a whole nother gig. So when they went back home, they had to take a moment and just really reflect on the differences in culture, the needs of the community, the real needs of the community, why people are, you know, a lot of people are in survival mode and they don't necessarily care about some random research project because, you know, we're just trying to survive at this time and get by. And so, so they really had a good, kind of a good reality check for them.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for putting in those, what you should do before. Let's see. Okay, so in thinking about while you are in an Arctic community, we asked the same group back at ICC Canada, that workshop, and they we asked them a few questions. So we asked them what were things that like thinking about while they were working with researchers, and then while researchers were present in their community or engaging with them or working with them in their communities. So we asked them, what were things that happened that you liked? Was there things that happened that you didn't like or made you feel uncomfortable? So here were some of their anonymized responses. So get permission from participants in clear ways. Let us be leaders in the research instead of just be research assistants or driving them around. Heard that a few times. Seek a co-researcher and work directly with them as guides and equal partners. Allow us to be co-authors. Ask how you might share results with the community, especially in ways that will be meaningful to the community. Make themselves part of the community. Celebrate with us, right? Like mourn with us. Learn the what not to do's of the community. Understand the land that they are on and be mindful of the surroundings. Eat our foods respectfully. Respect our elders. Come with an open mind. Spend money in our communities.
Yes, and one of the things that would really our people love is to share our native foods. And it's not always like a treat for some people that haven't been eating it all their lives. It is for us. Like tonight, we're having a big feast and we're making Uluak Itchuaqiyaq, which is like seal inglocks and niglik soup and trout cock and sheepish cock, all these different things that we love. And one of the things that kind of lets somebody stand out really is their respect for our foods and trying them, and you know, even just coming to visit our homes and maybe enjoying coffee and cracker. Bring a little thing of coffee, you know, to just introduce yourself. Things like that are just things that we really appreciate in the Arctic communities. So next, we're going to go back to the drawing board on the chat and say, what do you need to do while working with Arctic Indigenous communities? So we'll give you a couple of minutes here. And Cana, I don't know if you want to explain this a little bit better.
So yeah, if you want to just put in information about like thinking about, it doesn't have to be necessarily in field work, but that's certainly something that can be important. But thinking about how do you collaborate, or how would you like to collaborate with Arctic Indigenous communities in the future, and that part of that active collaboration or the active engagement piece. So we'll put on the responses we got from our collaborators to help you. Thinking about Indigenous knowledges, what they mean, how they are really important in the community, super important. Thinking about feedback and taking that in a very humble way. Awesome. Listening.
Kat says hire locals. Yes. Kat, I saw that my husband fed your dad last night. He ate good. Talk and talk and talk.
Right, yeah, let the community members lead for sure.
Mm-hmm. Monica agreed.
Okay, there we go. We're going to move on. So now we want to think about what to do after, right? Engaging with communities in the Arctic. So we asked our colleagues again from Canada and Alaska. And so here are their anonymized and synthesized responses. The ones that are in brackets are kind of just a conglomeration of a few responses that we got. So the first one is thank the people, thank the tribe, and acknowledge contributions. Let people know how long it's going to be until you share your findings. That came up quite a bit. Make sure we feel good about how things went. Let us review the results before it's published so we know that they respect our input. Don't just like, oh, now I know exactly what they're talking about. Like, bring those back to the community and let the community comment on the results, because they might have something really important to share. Hold Indigenous knowledge on the same level as quote unquote hard science, right? Indigenous knowledges are sovereign and they do not need to pass through Western academic lenses to be valid. Share research findings with the community via community presentations, speaking directly with participants and sharing with Elders Council. Make sure that the community gets the information rather than just the leaders of the community or organizations in the community, so that the common person can have access to this information should they want. Make curriculum for the school so kids can learn through their own culture and lands, which helps amplify our needs and our knowledges as well. Or that's another part. Ask us what else we need. Discuss further or subsequent types of research related to the project and involve the community with them. Stay in touch. Maybe there's something else that can be done that's related to what y'all are doing.
Yes, and the one that I wanted to share as a community perspective on this, I think Monica hit it. I think it was Monica that hit it in the chat, is sharing an immediate response to the people, not just the findings later on or whatever it is, but it doesn't take much to give someone a phone call and say, thank you for working with me. I've done this much research so far, and this is the direction that it seems to be going, being able to communicate like that so that we don't feel left out of the loop. And remember, all of this talk was done in 21, this group that we did. And since then, this is when, even in our own minds, we weren't quite thinking about conceptualization of a project and including the community in the conceptualization or even the pre-conceptualization part of things. This is work that's already been done in the past, decades, and this is the comments that we received back. And now we are really learning how to include the community with conceptualization. So that's a really interesting, and that'll be for another talk, but I just wanted to point that out. So again, let's take some time and throw in the chat what do you need to do after learning from Inuit communities, and go ahead and take the couple of minutes to write that, and we'll put the community responses back up again.
Ooh, I love the idea of a feast. That's great. I like this idea of advocacy. A lot of times we, so I'm a person with a PhD, and a lot of people defer to me. And when I can use the power, the relative power and privilege that I have as a professor to advocate for Indigenous knowledges, advocate for community partner expertise, that's really an important part of this work. Thank you for that comment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cana's been really generous. Even when people have wanted her to edit, an Indigenous book or whatever, and about parenting back a couple of years ago. And she said, I could talk to you about this. I can edit your book, but why don't you call a real expert, and gave them my number. And so because I'm on the ground and I've done a lot of work with kids and have 5 of my own, so I figured a few things out. So it was really generous, I think, and having that generosity even moved to the place of being an author and a co-author in some of the work that we've put together and written. You know, that's not something generally done, is sharing those types of things. And so I really appreciate it when my expertise is acknowledged and used as, you know, an equal partner.
Yeah, it doesn't take away from anyone to share the benefits of research widely and generously. All right. Thank you so much for all of these comments.
Yeah, great stuff.
So one of our colleague from Nome, who was part of the ICC workshop, she taught us this concept that she had learned somewhere else called remembering forward. And remembering forward, it means to take what we learn and to use it to actively plan for the future. And so as we kind of start closing up this workshop and leave lots of time for questions, we want you to start thinking about remembering forward. So we're gonna share how our community collaborators and colleagues from Canada and Alaska, what they said about remembering forward in terms of themselves as research partners, community research partners in the future. So we asked them, how will you challenge yourself moving forward when it comes to research in your community? And their responses were, make sure people can understand what they're getting into. It's okay to say that you don't understand what they want to do or what they're asking you. Integrate Western ideas with traditional values. Incorporate community needs in research goals. Come up with concrete actions when it comes to self-advocacy with researchers. Give ourselves permission to say no to research that doesn't suit or need our needs or our values. Develop my own standards as a research partner and communicate them before research happens. Work with local tribe to make a research protocol that people need to follow while they're working in our communities.
Yeah, I really love developing standards and saying no and being a lead and directing research from the community side, because there have been power imbalances for a long time, and we aren't going to engage when we feel that we can't have a say in the direction of where things are going. And so I've been able to kind of develop my own standards. And for instance, one is, that success isn't, success to me is when my work is experienced by people in the furthest, darkest, most hurting places for our people. And if that's not done, then I'm going to keep that standard as, sorry, I can't be a part of this. Maybe you can call somebody else for it, but that's my own standard for that. And so looking at some of the things that we learned in the last few work slides, I guess you could say, where you put things in the chat, what have you taken from that you're going to remember going forward? And I'd like you to go ahead and put those things in the chat. We call this a workshop. Put you to work. So, and I believe we'll be able to copy the chat and send it off to participants so that you can have them to reflect on a little bit later.
Don't put Indigenous knowledges that you got from our communities behind a paywall. So our communities cannot retrieve our own knowledges back, right? That's a huge issue. And we know that open access is expensive, but there needs to be a way for the community to actively access, not just say, oh, I shared the file with somebody, but actively be able to access research about our communities and impacting our communities openly and easily in the future. Even as an academic, on the academic side, as an Indigenous scholar, I get approached so much to pick my brain, to do this, to do this, to do this, because, you know, people have found access to me. And so imagine community partners where research isn't even part of their job, but like it's not even on their job description. It's on my job description, but it's not necessarily on theirs. And so that's the research fatigue and the burnout is absolutely real. Thank you so much for all your comments in here. Right, there's no work about us without us. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of that, everyone. We want to kind of close off this talk. We want to give you some resources. So one of the resources that we have was that guide that I put up at the beginning. So this is the Equitable Arctic Research Guide. You can download it from our website. It's respectfulresearch.com/EAR, Equitable Arctic Research Guide. So it's about 12 pages and it has space for setting goals, for having accountability, for like thinking through some of the back end work that we have to do emotionally and tangibly with others in doing equitable Arctic research. And then Corina, do you want to say something about the quiz?
Oh my gosh, we have the funnest quiz. I think it's only about 9 questions, but it will lead you to some really cool information for kind of seeing which Arctic research superhero you are. We have caribous and tutu and Qaaġraq. All of these different things will bring you to kind of assess where you are in becoming equitable in your research, and also give you plenty of information on how to move you to the next level.
So you can find that at respectfulresearch.com/ear quiz. And then also, go ahead, Corina.
No, you got it.
Well, if you are into Facebook, I'm actually just started Facebook again because number one, that's where my community is up in Alaska. And so I want to stay connected because I get homesick. But on Facebook, we have created a space that is just supposed to be a low stakes community gathering space for all of us to learn together, to support one another in equitable Arctic research. So this is a private Facebook group. You can just go to Facebook and search for Equitable Arctic Research Community. And we've got, it's like over 60 people have signed up in this last week or so. And so it's brand new. We're just starting this out, and we would love for you to join us in this low stakes supportive environment. I mean, there's people from across, I mean, lots of contexts. It's a very diverse group in this Facebook group.
And we want to leave a good amount of time for question and answer. So we'd like to end here, but we just want to thank you, Iñupiaq, for your time with us today. And we hope that we were able to help, bring a different perspective into your research and some ideas for you to move forward. And as we always do, we love to share our food. And so here virtually is our bowhead whale, muktuk, we call it black muktuk, and it's a good delicacy. We're going to be sharing it tonight with our group. In fact, we have unalik, which my husband made. We got some muktuk from Point Hope, and he boiled it up and made unalik. And some of you might know what that is. It's one of my favorites. So take Iñupiaq, and we'll move on to the question and answer.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, both Cana and Corina. This has been a really good workshop. As a quick note to everyone, the presentation will be recorded and will be archived and available for people to view later. And we have been saving the chat. We're now going to begin our question and answer session. And as a reminder, if you're joining by Zoom, you can either ask a question directly in the chat to everyone or to me directly. That's Betsy. And if you're joining, then you can raise your hand, or you can raise your hand. I can call on you. So you can type your question to the chat and I can read it aloud. If you're joining by phone, and might be a couple people joining by phone, you will need to raise your hand by pressing *9, then ask your question aloud, and then remember to mute yourself by pressing *6. And if needed, Cana and Corina will have offered to continue to be available for another 5 to 10 minutes at the top of the hour. We'll do a soft closing a couple minutes before the hour and then continue as that's needed. We do have a couple questions and that have come up already. Stanette Vandenberg has asked 3 questions. I think I'll read them all 3 aloud and then allow Cana and Corina to respond. The first question is, are there any tips for doing equitable research as a student when you don't have the money to pay honoraria or to compensate people according to their skills as much as they deserve? The follow-up is, how do you find a balance between remaining respectful of the community and not wanting to contribute to research fatigue, but also engaging with people and sharing experiences? And the third follow-up is, as a PhD student, how do you co-create and equitably recognizing people's contributions as a PhD student if there are strict limitations on, for example, authorship? So those are the, so you want me to repeat those questions, or have you got them?
Maybe we'll do like one at a time, and then just as I had a hard time with that. Did you, Corina? You got it?
No, I didn't have a hard time, but I think you should answer these since it's kind of in your area.
Okay.
So are there any tips for doing equitable research as a student when you don't have money to pay for honoraria or to compensate people according to their skills as much as they deserve?
Well, I'll say one thing that I've learned. So I've been both a participant in Arctic research as from the community side, and I've received the Amazon gift card or whatever, done the interviews or even hosted people, and then I had conversations with researchers, and then I've been on the academic side, and budgeting is an intense thing. But one thing that, is important is oftentimes for the community is relationship. And so this, it's not always just about the money or any of that stuff. A lot of times it's like, hey, we are doing something that matters to the community. I am in conversation and in relationship with the community. And that, seems to be like, that seems to be a way forward. It's not like, don't assume that because there isn't a financial incentive for community members that they are not interested in the research, because there are community goals and interests and needs. But the relationship is some of the most important things that can be put forward. Corina, do you have a comment on that?
No, I agree. I think, relationship, there's a lot of things that don't take a lot of time, and we're not really, we don't need a lot. We're very simple people. And so, I think the relationship side of things would really help with that without, it's not that strainful on the budget. I guess that's the least thing that would be straining on the budget.
And then to think about the co-authorship part, when there's strict limitations, we have a research team where there's Virginia Tech faculty such as myself, and then other faculty, and then even from other institutions. And then, and Corina is our community partner and really is the lead of our project. And we have a postdoc as well. And so one thing that is really what we do as a community, as a team, right, a community team, is we talk about everybody's interests and goals and needs. And so we've had conversations where one of our partners wanted to submit to a special issue, and that for their own research line. And our work actually fits very well with whatever the call for proposals was. But we don't want to compete with each other as well, because that person's coming up for tenure in this, is going to have their tenure review coming up, and it fits on their timeline really well. And so we have this idea of we approach our research as a community together and negotiate those. Now, in thinking about Indigenous representation, though, as authors, especially when you're talking about Indigenous knowledges, I mean, let's face it, in today's world, if you put something out there about Indigenous people without having Indigenous authorship on there, you're going to get some tough questions. And that's just something that's a reality that I've seen over and over. Like people are, put their like paper out on Twitter, and people are like, okay, who was the Indigenous person that was part of your authorship team? Like, and those are questions that people have to answer. And if there isn't somebody, then you need to answer like why. And not everybody has the timeline for doing academic writing, nor the skill, like meaning like academic technical writing, like they haven't had the privilege of doing research writing before, and or really necessarily the interest or time to do this work. So thinking of innovative ways to incorporate Indigenous community partners in the writing process is something that our team has been working really hard on, to make sure that whatever we were writing about, that Corina can contribute in strength, understanding that she has a really complicated job that falls outside of this research project, and we want her to be represented, but we also want her to contribute in a way that is feasible for her. Corina, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so a lot of times, like for instance, recently, we just had a conversation that was recorded on Zoom, and that was easy for me. So like, there was questions, well, what happened when this happened? Or can you explain this, how you felt during this part of the thing? And so I was just answering them, and they were able to, of course, get that transcripted and extract from that some of the key things that that was useful for what the project that we were doing. And so it didn't take much time for me. I didn't have to sit down and think, okay, now I got to write it out, and not only write it out, but I got to make it sound good, because this is academia, right? And that's just way over my head half the time. So it was really helpful to be able to come up with these easy ways to help give me a chance to share without having to put a whole lot of like work into it. And so and I mean, Cana is a technical writer, and so is someone else on the other on the team. And so we would just have these conversations. Maybe they would write something, and I would go and we would review it, and I would adjust and make comments and changes, and that's how some of that writing was done.
And so that one of those publications is coming out soon. I'm not sure when, but it's about cultural humility, and it will be open access.
I think it has been, as you can see on chat, there's been several other questions that have come up, and some have been direct messages. And I will we'll do a soft close in about 5 minutes. So I'll read the next question. This is from Kurt Saul, who asks, if Richard Nelson landed at Wainwright today, what would you most like for him to know?
I'm going to have to Google who's Richard Nelson. Does anybody want to share that with me?
I believe Richard Nelson was an anthropological researcher in the last century.
Okay, well, I don't know what the context of that is, but
Okay.
yeah, maybe we can try to get back at that one a little bit later.
Okay, great. The next question is from Joshua Radium. Says, how do you respect local foods if they are foods that you can't eat? For example, if you have allergies or your own religious or cultural prohibitions.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because we like to share, and sometimes, again, our foods, if you're not growing up on them, they're hard to eat. And we understand that, we know that. But there are also people that come to your door and they just want to sit and ask you a bunch of questions. And we want to get to know you first. And so I've had people come and will say, you want you want coffee, coffee and cracker or whatever it is. And oftentimes a person will say, no, oh, no, that's okay. And we're saying, no, sit down, have coffee with us, eat the cracker, which is just a sailor boy cracker. It's not like a big deal, right? I mean, I'm gluten-free myself, but you can say, I have an allergy. Sorry, I'll take the coffee though, you know. You might even bring a little taste, like I just got back from Albuquerque and I brought back a little jar of jelly for prickly pear jelly. And so you might bring a taste of something from your area and show, you know, something that you, hey, you know, let me sit down and let me share this with you. And I mean, you know, it was like $2-3, this little tiny jar of jelly. But that's something that means a lot to us. Oftentimes, a real feast isn't going to be like a first experience or a first exposure. So usually that coffee and cracker will be good enough.
And if you do have the honor of people being willing to share like Iñupiaq, our native foods, okay, number one, there is so much work that takes to harvesting and preparing our food. Yeah. It is our hunters take risks going out to do this work right now, on the ice, right? We're still hunting right now, you know, and it may not be what you want to eat. That's your own choice as, you know, an autonomous human being, right? But the way you respond to our food with respect is noted. So you might politely decline. If you do taste something and it's not to your liking, just say, wow, that was interesting. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to try that. I've never had the opportunity before. You don't have to say whether you like it, whether you don't like it. You don't have to act like, oh, I'm so scared, because you have to remember that this is our food. This is our culture.
It's our soul. We're sharing our soul with you.
So treating it that with the respect that it is to give you a chance, an opportunity, showing that respect back is really what the essential part is. Mm-hmm. So we, you know, I've had students, we shared mukdak at one of my grad classes, and as students that were from a culture that was vegetarian. So I prepared tea for them from tundra tea, and they got a chance to try that. And it's not a big deal. It's just the respect being shown back and forth between each other.
Mm-hmm. And whatever you do, don't nuggle, which is like, ooh, like that. Hold it in. Hold it in. Excuse yourself to the bathroom.
Okay, I'll do a soft close now. For those of us who want to continue the discussion, Cana and Corina have offered to be available for another 5 to 10 minutes. And please continue to add your questions in the chat. But for those of you who are leaving now, on behalf of Arcus, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And a special thanks, of course, to our speakers, Cana and Corina, for this excellent workshop. We are continually working to improve our seminar series, as well as looking for suggestions for future seminar topics and speakers. Please take a minute or two to complete our short survey. A link to that is available now in the chat window. A recording of today's webinar will be archived and available on the Arcus Seminar Series webpage, and an email containing the links to both the survey and the archived webinar will be sent to you once the video recording has been posted online. We invite all of you to join us for an upcoming webinar on the 28th of June. Alec Bennett from the University of Alaska Fairbanks will present Arctic sea ice decline and geoengineering solutions, cascading security and ethical considerations. Registration for that will be available online soon. Please visit the Arcus homepage, that's arcus.org, for more information about Arcus, our programs, and upcoming Arctic-related events. Thank you for joining us again. And for those of us continuing, our next question comes from, I'm going back to my, another question is actually from Stinette. I've been wondering about feelings surrounding the implementation of Indigenous research methods that are not necessarily Inuit specific.
Well, the research methods that, so I have a publication about this. It's linked in the Equitable Arctic Research Guide, so you can take a look at the Iñupiaq. You can say that's talking about thinking about using and thinking about the Iñupiaq state as a reasonable and appropriate framework for understanding communication from the region that like I'm from, right? So for myself, working in my own community, thinking about the Iñupiaq state is an appropriate framework. But that does not mean the Iñupiaq state or the IQ like are transferable across contexts. There are contours that other people have, or other cultures, but it doesn't mean that one framework from an indigenous community in location A is an appropriate framework for thinking about work in location B, right, or C. And so thinking about what context exists there, if there are codified values, if there are research methods that the community prefers, then that's what you go with. Because like there's nothing worse than like in this publication that's linked in the it's about the Iñupiaq state. I talk about when you use Aristotle to analyze Inuit communication, that actually is kind of weird. And so like, why? Right. And you get actually inaccurate results. So when you think something is an appeal to ethos, it's actually accountability or something else that's happening. It's actually our value system is a better framework for understanding our communication and actions. So I strongly believe it's locally driven context frameworks, methodologies that should be used in our communities.
Thank you. Helen Jeef asked, how do you suggest presenting information about difficult issues that people in the community share with you that are not necessarily positive, but are part of the reality? Does the guide address that?
I can help answer that very carefully. There are, I represent myself, my family, my immediate family, and many of the people's ways in our region. But there are lots of different levels of readiness that a community would have to hear back what the findings are if they're difficult. So I would suggest finding a local person that you trust, a research partner on the ground, whatever it may be, to ask that question to specifically, because of, there are some communities even in our region. We have 11 villages in our region, and some are just, they don't want to hear the word suicide. They don't, and some are at a different place. And so some, you really have to take the temperature of that particular community before you move forward with that. But again, very carefully. Thank you for that question.
I see Ben has his hand raised.
Okay. Go ahead, Ben. Can you ask your question?
Yes, Corina Uluak Itchuaqiyaq. My question is, how could the adoption of EAR, I really love that acronym, and thank you. How does the adoption of EAR change the current dynamics between international organizations, institutions, governments, and Inuit? And how does it specifically address disparities that we face every day when we have boots on the ground and Indigenous knowledge holders and Indigenous peoples and communities living every day within the Arctic?
So one thing that's really important in how the tactics that I chose to put forward as part of Equitable Arctic Research, they are all really centered in Indigenous leadership and our sovereignty. And so when it comes to, and that's, if you have 5 minutes with me, and you'll know that that's something that is like at the front of how I think about how research and engagement in our communities needs to happen. And so thinking about how it affects on organizational scale, right? That respect for our sovereignty and that amplification of our sovereignty can extend to all sorts of things when it comes to policy, when it comes to the way that we, engage with each other as well. So that's kind of the backbone of these tactics as well. And, and they're really, when it comes to like, how does it address inequities, right? When our people are leading, right? Number one, there's a great responsibility in leadership, right? Leadership is an act of service. And so but our people are well equipped for serving our own people, and our people have the expertise of our own communities in order to help address those inequities. But you cannot work like when I work on research, and part of my role is vetting potential partners for these community research partnerships. I'm not going to bring someone to my community that may potentially cause harm, or that's going to try to reinscribe colonial violence or Western academic indifference to our indigenous knowledges. I'm not going to do that. They don't get in the door. And so, Corina, do you want to say something?
Yeah, and then she brings them to me and I do the very same thing. But how we've adopted this and kind of figured out how to make it come to action in our research was just to practice it, just to find partners that look at this and embrace it, find partners that are really willing to change and put their necks out sometimes, because we're talking about like these Fed grants or different types of things that keep these restrictions from happening. Like for instance, kind of going into the communities ahead of time and learning about the people and stuff like that. There's time constraints. There's all kinds of things that you look at that I think they need to be changed on the bigger level. But I think that as we practice and as we each adopt these different philosophies and practices in equitable Arctic research, it will grow. It will become a thing. The communities will know that they can vet, that they can lead, that they can take a project idea and go, no, I don't think so. I don't think we need that. But how about if we tweak that just a little, because that would help us. That would really help us, and there's all these different practices. This is a very short webinar, but there are all these different practices that can become a very practiced and practical beginning.
Thank you. We have 3 more questions that are queued up. And the first is from Maggie Broadwater at NOAA. She asks, what can managers of federal funding programs do to ensure appropriate engagement? We are currently taking actions to connect directly with communities and establish relationships to facilitate feedback, but don't want to create communication fatigue. Thank you. This has been really helpful.
Corina, do you want to take this one?
I'm rereading the question here. Why don't you take a stab at it first, and then I'll.
So I am currently the non-federal lead for the participatory and Indigenous leadership and research team at IARPIC, the collaborative team. And we're working really hard on thinking about. We're working with a bunch of federal agencies right now in thinking about multiple objectives that we have. And really, when it comes down to it, our representation is really important, but you can't just there are structures, there's infrastructure that needs and support that needs to happen so community members can equitably participate in decision-making processes that are because sometimes stuff, as the non-federal lead, I don't understand the federal jargon about stuff. We were talking about a survey and suddenly we're like, okay, no, we have the Paperwork Reduction Act, like what's going on? Like all these different things that start like get pinged as soon as you want to do one thing. It's really, really confusing. And I'm somebody that has lots of institutional support, right, to be able to approach this work. And so imagine a community member, like being able to make sure that they can arrive and be part of the same conversations, and bring their strengths to these conversations is really important. And so, it doesn't mean give them a 300-page guide, right? We all have seen the NSF guide for writing our grants. That's really tough. And thinking about like, here, this is all you need to know for writing grants. That's really excruciating way to try to get to have equity. But thinking about ways that you can approach the community on their own terms. Making short videos that explain even an interface that they might need to work with to do reviews, right? To be able to do these things so they can arrive with not being frustrated because they couldn't do the basics of like getting into a federal lockdown review space, which is actually quite complicated. And then they arrive there frustrated and feeling less than, when the infrastructure makes them feel like they don't belong. Like, how do the conversations go forward? At least that's been my perspective in talking with community partners about this kind of work.
Okay, well, I will add a little bit to that. My thought is that everybody needs to adjust. We've done it wrong. We've done it wrong all these years. The outcomes aren't the best outcomes. I've worked on the ground with Fed grants and things like that. And, if we would just make these little adjustments or even big adjustments in the conceptualization stage of a project, including the community member, then we wouldn't be finding ourselves 3-5 years down the line checkmarking boxes of a grant just to comply, because it's not going to hit the community like you hope it will and help them. So, and that's just my perspective as someone who's worked on the ground on research projects. And the other thing that Cana mentioned is, having a voice in a community, having the direction being put on you as a community member, and having a team go, what do you think? Like, will this work? And this is what we're working with. These are our constraints. How could we best make this happen? Just that alone can kind of give this psychological transference of power imbalance, back to the community, and give me like, okay, wow, if I really do have a say in it, then I'm not going to be tired, because I'm going to feel like this project, whatever it is I'm working on, will make a difference for our people, and we will be more engaged, and we will be more active in being and available for the research itself. And so I think everyone needs to adjust, and I'm hoping and I'm seeing that the Fed funders are listening. And I hope that they'll be adjusting as well, just like all of us need to adjust to right the wrong of how things have gone in the past several decades. So a little harsh there, but that's truth, and it's the reality of what we live in. The last webinar, I said, hey, how much, why should we adjust as a researcher? Why should we adjust? Why should the Fed funders adjust? In order to, because it takes so much to build relationships, to do it right, to give, to pre-conceptualization stages and all this stuff. There's a lot of money, time, and effort put into that. But my question back to the researchers and the funders is, how much money and time and effort has already been put into projects that fall flat, that didn't quite hit the mark. And so, it's an adjustment time for all of us.
Thank you.
One thing that's really important too is I recently was approached by a federal agency, I won't say which one, and they were like, hey, can you help us we're doing this initiative, and we want indigenous folks. And the timeline was so short of to get indigenous response. And that's not the
Mhm.
only time that I've ever been approached with the same thing. You know, it's like they like, okay, right now is subsistence time, so I can't really ask people until after fall hunting of caribou. Like, what are we going to do? You know, like, how do we go? And then there's no budget for community engagement. There's no, you know what I mean? And it's like, this stuff can be really frustrating, you know, and to the communities when they're like, okay, we want your answer right now. And there's no time for people to think, to consult with their community, like elder board. I mean, it's a lot when you put it on like one community partner to say, this is the direction we want for all projects happening in our region. That's like quite a big ask. So like appropriate time for people to reflect and get consultation from the community themselves, you know, and have times to reflect on those potential ideas is really a sign of respect. Like giving the community the respect of time is one of the most essential things you can do.
Thank you. Two more questions. One is from Sydney Walloven. She said, is it more appropriate to formulate a plan, build relationships with Indigenous communities prior to obtaining funding to execute a desired research plan, which it's just continuation of what you've been saying? Or is it better to bring funding resources, tentative ideas to the community and say, here's what was available to use and figure out a plan to move forward from those together?
Let me answer as a community partner. I would love for someone to come to a community with an idea, to come to me with an idea and say, you know, these are my skills, my expertise, my areas of knowledge and things that I can bring to the table. What are your needs? And how could these two things fit together? And to me, that is that will create more success than coming with the resources already. In fact, in the rematriation project that Cana and I work on in Iñupiaq Trust and BT, we didn't even go for funding except for little private grants that people heard about. Oh, we heard you're doing this thing. Let's give you a little bit of money to get started. But we didn't even go. We haven't even gone for a Fed grant or any kind of big grant because we wanted this to be right. We had to go back to the drawing table several times to get it right. And we come to a place where it's even creating other projects out of that. And so I would suggest, thinking about what you would like to bring to the community and saying, how could my expertise help you in what your needs are?
Ben, you have a comment about that?
Ben, go ahead and you've got your hand raised. You want to unmute yourself?
Oh, sorry about that. Not really a comment, but a follow-up question to all the comments and feedback that you both have provided. It's been very insightful and informative. So in regards to how Equitable Arctic Research is utilized, how do you both see in the future, in planning ahead and looking forward, how do the protocols propose to integrate Indigenous knowledge, or the utilization of Indigenous knowledge, rather, in the co-production of knowledge, in decision-making processes and policy development? And at what scale do you envision this being used and implemented?
Well, I feel like we're planting seeds for the future, right? And one of the things that I really, I know a lot of this work that we're asking people to do is a big shift in status quo mainstream practices, right? Even timelines. Like one thing that we're stressing is, the respect of time. And, but those shifts are going to make research in the Arctic, and therefore even I'm not somebody that says I can empower anybody. I can just provide space for people's claiming their own power, right? But provide space for our people to claim our power on our lands, right? That's the goal. And with that power, we can do great things. We can bring, right, we can do world, like co-production of knowledge is like bringing some of this Western academic stuff I've learned and bringing it and what I've learned from the Iñupiaq state and putting them together with community needs. And that like provides some like a really cool way to think about capacities. Corina says capacity is just too academic of a word, but thinking about our community needs and addressing those, and then planting seeds for even future growth in our own communities and that reclamation of our like ancestral power in these spaces. And that's something that's really important to me. And, you know, it takes a lot of humility for this work. That's why humility is number one in how we approach it, because it makes people who typically have power, such as someone like myself with a PhD, right? And I get to be Dr. Itchuaqiyaq here. Students call me, don't call me Cana, you know, that kind of stuff, right? Someone who gets a lot of power, institutional power, to say, listen, I'm gonna back up and I'm gonna offer what I have to you. And that is not like, it's about like listening and making space for the community to rise in the way that they would like to.
I'd like to add to that, if I may. Thank you, Ben. Indigenous knowledge. You know, it was probably about a decade ago, I was counseling someone, and I said something like, yeah, I have basically a counseling session with someone, you know, I was telling somebody that, and, you know, there's always comments like, are you a counselor? What does that mean? Like, yeah, I counsel a lot of people, but I'm not Western trained as a counselor. I don't have a certificate. I don't have a master's degree. I don't have all this stuff. And guess what? I'm also a doctor. I'm also and I'm boldly saying this right now. I'm also a writer. I'm also, you know, a practitioner of many, many things. I'm a sociologist, you know, all these things, right? So, and as a community member with an 8th grade education, Western education, okay, I can come to this table and boldly say what I've learned to practice in my community. And we have many, many, many scientists that have not been Western trained. But if you look into the knowledges of our people and how we've come up with the most like amazing findings, and in the harshest of land, where if you don't figure it out, you're gonna die, you know, and we figured it out. And so I want to say that, you know, we need to come to the table boldly with the idea that we have practiced a lot of things. We've learned a lot of things. We have our own educational process that might not make me a PhD in a Western setting, right? But I am a PhD in my setting. I have become to a place where the elders in my region have asked me to be their elder representative in spaces. You know, if that's not PhD level, when you're given this honor to represent elders in your region, then I don't know what is. And so coming to that table and making sure that you respect the knowledge in that way is really, really important.
Thank you. Another question comes from Ben Edwards, and I think it's related. It says, is there a resource, and this might be something for the Facebook page, of community contacts for communities that are interested in being contacted by a researcher, or in general ways to get in contact with community members?
I had said to our research team, boy, we need something like an Angie's List for research. You know, I worked with docs at Harvard, and we had to, there is an organization, there's several organizations that will link in a medical need to a practitioner, right? And send them to a certain community. And this is a wonderful idea. And I think we have in the plans to, in another project that we have coming up at some point, to figure out this like Angie's list of Arctic research where we can pre-vet and we can make sure that the people have, not we, but whoever's doing this, have a place to have your expertise and desires and work needs fit exactly with the community's needs. Cana, and then what do we have immediately?
So in the Facebook group, it's still just starting, but like what Betsy was saying is that it's, that's a great spot to enter and people can observe you. I was looking at the engagement and the engagement is mostly me trying to post things and trying to get people to engage and in this like fun way so people can see each other's personalities and interests and needs, but like people are just not biting. I don't know if they're just wearing their like professional hat and I don't know what's going on, but I was like, what do I need to do to try to be fun? And because people like Corina or other community partners which exist in that group, there are a bunch of Native folks in there that like they just see how you are and they see if they want to connect with you. Like, there's a space, there's an intro post for people to like write a paragraph about who they are and what they're interested in and introduce themselves. And the majority of people who have entered the Facebook group have not introduced themselves to the group. And it's just kind of interesting to see that dynamic of like, hey, we're creating a space for people to communicate.
Well, we just came up with the idea that we're just going to start posting these different ideas and tips into that, where people can make their comments much like they did with the chat here today. And so I think, again, Cana said it's like a week and a half old. So we're just getting started, but that is a space because was it Cana that you looked everywhere and there really wasn't a place to do this. So we'd like to help create that because we want our people to be served well.
There's, we have like IARPIC has a great space, but it's mostly professional stuff that people are posting. Arcus has the listserv and the thing that comes out on the email, but those are not necessarily conversations that people are having. And so that's what we're trying to facilitate is a conversation. And we chose Facebook because it doesn't cost us anything to do this work. And it's a place that a lot of people already exist on there. And, there's a lot of functionality there. So we hope that you all will, I didn't mean to scold everybody, but I am scolding folks because just so you know, people like see how you engage. Like it is a two-way mirror there. So just to be aware, but we want it to be low stakes and fun. And so the part of that makes it low stakes is to have fun together.
Thank you for posting.
Sydney Wallover posted the link to Facebook communities.
Thanks, Sydney.
Before we close, there was one more comment from Maggie Broadwater and Noah that I want to make sure that people saw and heard. And she says that she agrees about the time that's needed and that we will work on this, but are often meeting agency and fiscal year timelines. So it is beyond the program funding office and therefore it's harder to correct. But I think a really good thing to share from the federal agency perspective.
I love research and planning grants because they allow for that time.
Right. Well,
change has to start.
We've spent an extra half hour, which I think has been wonderful. And I don't see any additional questions coming into chat. So I think we will begin to close. And again, on behalf of Carcass, I want to thank everyone that's been able to join today. There has been really tremendous conversation in the chat. It's been one of the most interactive webinars I've ever seen. And a special thank to both Cana and Corina for such personal and excellent presentation. This is wonderful. Stacy's going to share a slide. As we said earlier, we are continuing working to improve our seminar series and looking for suggestions for future seminar topics and speakers. Please take a minute or two to complete our short survey, and a link to that is being added to the chat window now. A recording of today's webinar will be archived and available on the ARCIS Seminar Series webpage. An email containing links to both the survey and the archived webinar will be sent once the video recording has been posted online. Again, we invite you all to join us in an upcoming webinar, which will be on the 28th of June. Alec Bennett from the University of Alaska Fairbanks will present Arctic sea ice decline and geoengineering solutions, cascading security and ethical considerations. Registration for that will be available online soon. Please be sure to visit the ARCIS homepage for more information about ARCIS, our programs, and other upcoming Arctic-related events. Thank you again to our speakers, to Cana and Corina, and to everyone for joining us today. This concludes our webinar. Wish you all to be well and to have a good day. Thank you.